Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Trailblazing Radical Pleasurist interview series. And today I have a dear friend and soul sister, Kelsey Lawford. And I was just telling her that she has so much healing power and she facilitates healing in so many different ways that I wouldn't even do it justice by describing it. So, Kelsey, let us know what it is that the gifts that you are sharing in the world.
Yeah, thanks, Sophia. Thanks for having me on your Trailblazing. I love that name. In some ways, I feel like I am trying to be a trailblazer. That's my mission. I would say that my work is, if I were to clump it all together, would be a trauma therapy for women. I do coaching aspects of that, and it's offered in many different aspects. I do one-on-one work, and I also do online programs. And I also have a podcast for women as a free resource where I interview people such as yourself. and that's just a free resource for women to have who are maybe looking for some inspiration or looking for something else or something new, something different. So women share their story and what worked for them. And in my trauma therapy, I use many different modalities that I've learned from. My main modality I'm working with right now is somatic experiencing and integrative breath work. So that's what I do for work.
And I have to say, I have experienced integrative breath work, not so much somatic experiencing, but I've experienced many different ways of working with the body, and that's what it really means. And it is powerful. It's very, very powerful. And and we're always telling people that I encounter and women and in all my lives that I do that being in the body and using the body as the vehicle for healing is extremely important. It's inevitable. We can't avoid it if we want to have the profound healing that is required from trauma. And you and I have talked about trauma a lot before in terms of trauma can look and manifest in a lot of different ways. And what somebody calls trauma is really a personal label. It's not it's not just being a war veteran or being sexually assaulted. Those are extremes, or being a sexual slave. That's been coming up a lot lately. Can you talk a little bit about what the spectrum of what women call trauma?
Yeah, it's really, it's really diverse and dynamic. And what we know, and I say what we know because I'm sort of a part of the somatic experiencing community now, where there's a lot of research going around on the nervous system and the body and how it reacts to trauma. And the interesting thing is that trauma shows up in the body in a number of different ways, but those ways are not like, no matter what happened to you, it's going to show up in the body within one of these pathways. So trauma can be complex trauma where you've experienced neglect over a long time and then finally it becomes too much. It can, trauma can happen from childhood and affect you in your adulthood. It can happen in an instant where you have a big accident. And no matter what's happened is those pathways are showing up in the body somewhat the same. We can sort of track the nervous system the same, which makes resolving trauma and healing from trauma really, it's really doable. It's not, there isn't any trauma out there that someone can't eventually overcome or learn to work with, because what we're seeing now in the body and through neuroscience is that we can actually rewire the nervous system to become more regulated again.
Thank you for saying that, because there's so much out there in the world that I believe says otherwise.
Oh, yeah.
I've worked with many rape survivors, and I was doing therapies that were known as unconventional at the time, 10 years ago. I was doing solution-focused therapy. I wasn't doing the straight-up trauma work, like you must relive it, kind of thing. And I think what you just said gives people hope. I hope it gives people hope in that it's not something that has to stay in the body or with you at all times. And that's huge, because I think for example, DSM, which I have a hate relationship with for sure, and PTSD, and just all of these labels that say you are this. And something that stayed with me in a conversation that you and I had was how you talked about that you are recovered addict, recovered from trauma, not recovering, but recovered. And that really stayed with me. And that's very different from the current paradigm and how people label addiction and trauma. And I would love to know what that means to you.
Yeah, I think this is part of my trailblazing. You know, it's one of the aspects of it that I don't feel like I'm in recovery anymore, because my addictions are not controlling my life. I have a really healthy relationship to substance, and even though at one point I absolutely didn't, I say I'm a recovered cocaine addict, and so and I had issues with alcohol, and I feel like I've done the work enough that now it doesn't feel like I'm out of control with it. I can always choose, and I always have that choice. And as I was saying just before we sort of got on the call here to you, was that I'm having a day where my stuff is up, like huge. And in the past, when my shit was up, it would be like, where's the drugs? Where's the alcohol? Where's something to distract me? And not to say that I don't distract myself now, but there's this level of comfort that I am comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I don't feel like I have to act out or resort to old patterns. And I can actually say, I'm going to change this pattern. And so I think in, a lot of the realms of addiction and recovery, that once you've an addict, you'll always be a recovering addict, or once you've had trauma, you're always a survivor. And it's like, well, what I'm dealing with right now is no different than the person who hasn't been through trauma. But my stuff's up and I'm looking at it, and the fact that I have an ability to look at it, and not resort to my old patterns means I'm recovered. And not to say like I still go into old patterns sometimes, but not to the detriment of my health or wellness.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And what I'm hearing when you say that is that it's a complete rewiring, that it's completely possible to reprogram the neural pathways and the way the body experiences things and the way that you react emotionally, that you don't always have to get charged by the same kind of stimuli that usually would produce a trauma response or an addiction response or some kind of behavioral pattern. And again, that brings so much hope that I want to yell from the mountaintops, like it's so possible. It's not that it's possible, it's here, it exists. And you're here, thank goddess, for women to, one, this is really huge, and that's why I have you on today. You are making the unspeakable speakable. You go around and you talk about trauma like you're talking about the weather. That's huge.
That's the other part of my trailblazing.
Yes. I've been with Kelsey to business networking, and she's just, it flows, right? So talk about that, how that part of trailblazing.
Yeah, that's a huge part of one of the reasons why I wanted to create the podcast in the first place, is because there's this silence that's happening, and I just want to break that silence. I want people to be able to do GoFundMe pages for their mental health recovery, not just cancer. It's, I see, which is amazing. Like, I'm all for people doing GoFundMe for cancer, but I want that sort of same support to be happening for people with mental health. And I want to break that stigma that there's something wrong with us if we have been an addict, or we're depressed, or we have anxiety. And, I constantly, because I've been in the recovery realm and world for so long, and I've gone through my own journey, I have people talk to me about it a lot. Like, oh, I'm quitting drinking, or my friend's sister just went into rehab, but don't tell anybody. It's like this anonymous thing is really keeping people from getting the help that they need. And it's not to say that you need to be as open as I am. I think that's part of my path and journey. And so I am really comfortable. Not everyone is comfortable, and you don't have to share your dirty secrets with, everyone. But I really feel like if we can sort of, people who are willing to share their story, even a part of their story, I often, when I talk to the women and preparing them for the podcast, I'm like, share your story, but you can be as vague as you want. You can say, I experienced a lot of, I was in a household that wasn't supportive of my development as a child. That can mean so many things, but they're still sharing their story and people can still relate to you. And I'm really, really, really passionate about, being able to say like, hey, like I got on the phone with you today and I'm like, my stuff's up and I'm having a hard time. And, I'm taking my little flower essence for depression and I'm taking my little flower essence for substance abuse because, that's my tendency is I still have those inklings of like, oh, it'd be really great to like, actually with drugs, I don't feel that anymore, but it'd be really great for me. It's the sugar now. Sugar is my go-to thing. And I still get depressed. That's another thing that, I hear this thing out there about to be like thriving in recovery means that you don't have anxiety and you're not on medication and, and you're not depressed. And that's absolutely not the truth. When you're thriving is when you're able to make the choice most of the time. I'd say like 80% of the time you're able to make the choice for yourself. You're making good choices for yourself. And 20% of the time, if you kind of slip up, whatever, it's no big deal. And so I think there's that sort of thing I want to change that stigma around too, of like, if I'm going to be recovered, then I'm not depressed anymore. And let me tell you, I go to therapy once a week. I still have weeks where I'm crying a lot and I just have more tools and resources and I have acceptance around who I am and that it's okay. Like, this is just what I have to deal with. It'd be like saying, if you have like arthritis, it doesn't mean that it means that you're not thriving in life. Well, you have arthritis, you can still thrive in life. And it's the same thing. You have depressive tendencies, you can still thrive. So I feel like that's another important thing that I really want to get out there.
Totally. And I hear the love and passion in your voice. And you just basically gave permission for all of us to be human.
Yeah.
That's really it.
Yeah.
Especially in the online world, I'm seeing this a lot, and I fall into that trap myself of I have to put on this like persona of I've got all of my shit together, and it's really, vulnerability is the new black. Being authentic and saying what is the new black.
Yeah.
And you being vulnerable right now is such a gift to all of us who are going to hear this and see this. Yes, the point is that we are at a point in our development where we have the awareness, have the incredible self-love, so that we can make the choices that bring us out of the anxiety, the depression, the cravings, the grasping, and it's lifelong. I mean, that's just the reality. It's lifelong. That's what I tell my clients all the time. However, the more that they incorporate the tools that you are teaching, that I am teaching, then they truly have a choice, and that's freedom. It's not, like you said, it's not that they're not going to be depressed. It's not like they're not going to make the wrong relationship choices for them, but they're going to come out of it quickly.
Yeah.
The point. So thank you for giving us all permission and room to grow and expand. And that's what growth and expansion is. And you said acceptance. That is really number one. And that's a huge space that I'm in right now, of no matter what is showing up, whatever it is, that it's perfect, that it's total acceptance of this particular person, situation, circumstance, trigger, that is for my learning, that is for my wisdom.
Yeah. And that can be hard, especially when, talking with people who have had sort of more traumatic, like severely traumatic things happen, and especially when it's happened to them and it hasn't necessarily been like their choice. And but it is, on the other side of it, for me, it definitely I chose to kind of put myself in that situation, whether I consciously did that or not. And it was pushing me towards my evolution and my healing, because another thing that we see, especially with complex trauma, where someone has had a childhood where sort of multiple things have happened, is that later on in life, it's called a strange attraction. You kind of start recreating those things. And it's basically your nervous system and your whole conscious being putting yourself in another situation where you can then complete that. But because we don't have the tools and resources to find completion, it can just sort of be this re-traumatizing thing, you know. Yeah. And even to the point of where I saw this, I saw the man who created somatic experiencing, Peter Levine. And if you can read his book, Waking the Tiger, it's a book that he's written for everyone. It's a great resource around this whole thing. But he was doing a demo on this woman, and she had been run over when she was 4 by her dad. And then later on in her, which was a total like freak accident, like that's not abuse, it's very different, it's very accidental. And then later on she almost got hit by a car again, and her dad was watching, you know. And it was like, wow, twice in one's life to almost be hit by a car is huge, or be hit by a car. And she was able to have that, even like that was a trigger then for her to find this healing, because it was like this recreation. So it's interesting, and that doesn't happen to everyone, so we don't have to worry, like, you know. But it is something that our life and sort of our whole being and even our nervous system is longing for, us to have completion around those things.
Yes, yes, and that makes so much sense. I'm reading Women Who Wrote the Will, so I'm thinking in folk stories right now. Yeah. So beautiful. And I'm reading about initiation, right? Coming home, how to come home, how to retrieve the soul skin to go home. And what you said sounded to me like this initiatory process that happens, and it'll happen until you, like you said, gain completion. It's like karma, and the people who you need to come into your life will keep coming into your life until you have learned what you needed to learn.
Yes.
Like, yeah. And you say with conviction, I am done now. I'm done.
Well, and then the other funny thing that can happen is you can then be back in that situation because you can be support for someone else because you've learned from it. That I see a lot. Yes. And that can be tricky too, because you're like, why am I here again? And then when you look around and it's more about the other people, and then you have that wisdom to share, like, oh, hey, like this is what worked for me when you were experiencing this. And that can be a really powerful tool. And I think that also speaks to, you know, what are sort of like our life lessons that we have for our entire life, why we're here, you know, why there's certain lessons that like we just are always working with. You know, one of them for me is money. There's a huge lesson around money for me, and it's in my like ancestral lineage, and it just always shows up for me, always, no matter like, and I'm like, okay. And there's sort of like an acceptance around that too, of like, this is something I always have to pay attention to. And once we can find, whether that's like, you know, it could be toxic relationships, or it could be, you know, sex, or it could be, you know, any number of one of those things. And, you know, when we can kind of just accept like, okay, this is something that is going to be a life lesson for me. Like, how can I take this on too, of like my recovery path is that it's a lifelong path. Like the life I live, like it's a lifestyle for me. That's why I say I'm recovered, is because now I'm in a lifestyle that supports my unique life lessons, where I've come from, what happened to me. And those lessons are just, sometimes they show up again. And so I can, you know, that's what's happening right now, is I have this huge layer that's coming up that feels really intense and really heavy. And, you know, I'm just kind of in it, and it's speaking to like, okay, this is just another part of that path. And to also, you know, be okay with feeling, I was talking about this with my friend the other day, feeling the good with the bad. You know, I find that another kind of common thing is that people will be like, I just want to feel good all the time. And it's like, well, we're human, you know, we don't feel good all the time. We get sick. So why would we feel emotionally good all the time, or spiritually good all the time? We're always going to have these moments where where I find they're an opportunity to develop a deeper and more intimate relationship with ourselves, and therefore, spirit.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
And there are more opportunities to practice acceptance because
Yeah.
it's all the same.
Mm-hmm.
I had this profound teaching this past weekend where it was very clear to me that it's all the same. Pain, pleasure, all
Yeah.
the same. Which is the same.
Yeah.
Just accept, because that's all it is.
Mm-hmm.
Really. If you want to eliminate suffering, you just accept.
Yeah.
I'm excited to be on that journey as well.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, what gives you the most pleasure in working with women?
Oh, that's a great question.
Of course, the radical pleasurist.
Yes. Because pleasure is something I'm like really exploring in my life right now. I'm really I'm working with my second chakra a lot. So
Perfect.
Working with women, there's something from, one, my like wounding from the feminine from when I was younger is that the feminine abandons me and betrays me. Like and that story played out for a long time. And then when I started doing more like women's circles, and I had my close girlfriends that I've had now for, they've seen me through it all. They haven't left, and they're still my really great friends. There's something really intimate about working with women that I find a lot of pleasure in. There's a level of intimacy that women can experience with each other that is unique to women, and I can even say someone who is more identified as a feminine essence, like man or whoever, if they're more identified with that feminine essence, there's this sweet thing that happens when those two beings interact. And to watch women heal or resolve or come complete with their trauma, and then all of a sudden go out, they just start doing amazing things, like whether it's like being a mom or going out and changing the world or doing whatever. There's this empowerment piece and also this intuition piece, like their intuition gets connected, and all of a sudden they're like, I'm going to do this, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I get really excited. I get really, really excited. And I do work with men in retreat, and I assist retreats where there's men too, and I love working with men and women, especially in a co-ed environment, and looking at that dynamic. But there's something, I can't even put really a word to it. There's just something that feels really juicy about working with women.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, absolutely. Totally.
Mm-hmm.
Totally with you on that. And speaking of women's circles, Kelsey and I are leading a women's circle in Portland, and it's part of a global event on June 10th called the Worldwide Women's Circle, and it's beautiful. The theme is sacred marriage, and it's all over Facebook. We're going to have a link to the event with this interview, and please come. It's going to be in the park, Peninsula Park, where all the roses are, and we envision hundreds of women. That's what I want. I want the whole park filled with women, and all of us being together and having this yummy intimacy, and women supporting women. That's for me the theme this month. So thank you so much, Kelsey, for your gifts in the world and for sharing so openly and vulnerably. It makes me feel like we're in the living room together, just having a conversation. And I love that. And that's why I love this series. Mm-hmm. So for you all to know about amazing trailblazers in different fields in the world so that you can feel connected. Thank you so much, and we will see you soon.
Yeah, thanks, Sophia. Thanks for having me on here.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye.